Hi everyone, this is Elias Martin of CollectingJapanesePrints.com. Welcome to Woodblock Wednesday, where every Wednesday we get together and discuss Japanese prints, paintings, history, and culture. Today's Woodblock Wednesday is it's inspired by a couple episodes ago. I did a short presentation on two prints by Tomoo Inagaki, and they were floral designs, keeping with a motif that I've been doing this summer. And I got a few private messages about showing his other body of work. It seems like there's a lot of Tomoo Inagaki fans that are interested in his cat designs. So what I decided to do is I pulled out a print that will be going up on my website in the coming weeks. There's a print of his by Tomoo Inagaki's cat design. I pulled a print of his, and that's what I wanted to say. And there's another print that's actually on my website now. It's by another Sosaku Hanga artist, Susumu Yamaguchi. I thought it would be an interesting sort of comparison between those two prints. And so if you haven't seen my Tomoo Inagaki video from a couple episodes ago, I want to encourage you to watch that first possibly, and then watch this one. But if you don't want to, or you're just interested in his cat designs, I'll give you a short intro into his life and his body of work. So without further ado, let's go to the table and have a look. So what I have here is a print by Tomoo Inagaki. And for those of you who are not familiar with him, his dates are 1902 to 1980. And this print is known by the title Cats in Love, and it was done in 1957. It's kind of a really interesting design. I'll just kind of zoom out so you can see the entire piece. So this design, I mean, I could talk a lot about it, but to give you a bit of an introduction to Tomoo Inagaki, Inagaki was a Sosaku Hanga artist, which means that he carved his own designs, printed his own work, and so his work is completely self-directed. He was one of the Sosaku Hanga artists that were working around Onchi, Koshiro Onchi, and they drew their inspiration from a variety of areas in life. And Inagaki started his career producing landscapes and florals and a couple of portraits, but about 1945, after the war, he started producing cat designs, and I think Oliver Statler mentioned in his book that he was inspired by his own cats. And for all of you who are pet lovers or who have pets or who have cats, we all know that cats in particular can have their own personalities. And so possibly inspired by his own cat, he created some designs that were really whimsical, fun, and they all sort of display cats interacting with each other or with people, or even just they're done as portraits, but they're done in a way that sort of give them personalities. And so they're not just designs of cats, but they have a human quality to them. And also, it just depends on the design, of course, but in this case, we have a print that shows the portrait of a cat, and he's kind of almost caught in contemplation. And then there's this inset here of two cats. It looks like this black cat is kind of on the prowl, about to chase the white cat. And the title being Cats in Love suggests that this dark cat might be this cat there, and he's thinking about maybe a romantic episode in his life or something that just recently happened. And I kind of read this as almost as if it's a flashback or a memory, or him thinking about what just happened, as opposed to this cat standing there and this happening in the moment in the background. I kind of more see it as if he's thinking about this. And this has a kind of an interesting sort of almost West Side Story vibe to it. The colors, the composition, it's very mid-century modern. It's whimsical. You can almost imagine some jazz playing in the background with this design. And it's a really fun design. It's a really cool, fun design. And, as I mentioned in my previous video, or in the video about Inagaki, he was a graphic designer. And so he knew how to create elements that captured the viewer's attention and was able to, sell a story in some ways. And in this case, he's showing or illustrating this story, this amorous encounter between these two cats, and in a way that is kind of almost like a bubble over the head of this cat that is basically thinking back to this encounter. At least that's how I read it, and I think it's successful if you do read it that way, where all the elements of this design do work to sort of support that theory. But of course, it could be all kinds of things. Another friend of mine mentioned that this cat might actually be standing there, sort of entertained because the encounter between these two cats may not be so successful. Who knows? And there's this kind of a smirk of knowing something, and I could see that too. But I'd rather think about it in the way where it's a memory, a fond memory, kind of the chase of love, and this cat looking for an amorous encounter with this white cat. And then I also like the background, the way that it's sort of dissected into these shapes that do suggest kind of a bubble. And are incorporated into the shading of the cat as well. That's kind of a cool thing. And I should also mention that, it's titled here, not dated, but it's in the catalog raisonné for Inagaki, and it's dated 1957. And the title's there, Cats in Love. 33 out of 50 is this impression. So Inagaki typically created limited editions in his prints, and that's what also makes them pretty sought after, because there aren't as many in circulation, because they're in limited editions of 50. 100 would be a large edition for him. Typically around this period, or even earlier, there are editions of 25, and edition of 50 was kind of a large edition. And this is one of his most successful designs of this period. It's one that a lot of people are looking for, and so I'm happy to be able to maybe provide a sneak peek to something that's coming up on my website. But I wanted also to compare this to another print by Susumu Yamaguchi, and he was also Sosaku Hanga artist, working at the same time, also sort of follower or a disciple of Onchi, worked, he worked in the same exact manner, creating his own designs, carving his own blocks, and printing his own prints. In this print, it's beautiful. It is of a sleeping cat, and then we have these elements of the wood grain in the background and in the foreground. And he used these really wonderful warm earth colors. And this design is known by a lot of titles. There's these persimmons that are being hung to dry, and there's sort of a warm spot because the sun is coming into the design, and so the cat falls asleep right in the warm spot, and these shadows are casted onto the background of the wall from the persimmons, and you see all these really interesting elements of light, shadow, and the surface. It's a really interesting study. It's almost as if Yamaguchi was thinking, how many surfaces and patterns can I get into a design? But in his case, I think it's a very successful design. It's not a loud design, though there are elements that done by a lesser artist would maybe unravel or get out of control. But Yamaguchi sort of tames the the design elements of the stripes, these black and white and gray stripes on the cat, and then the shadows in contrast to the wood grain, which is actually very pronounced in this design. But anyway, what I wanted to compare is that this design is very realistic. It's almost as if it's done after a photograph or something from real life, where Yamaguchi sat there and sort of took notes or sketched out this design. It's very realistic in that way, whereas Inagaki's design is completely imaginative. It is something completely out of the world of fantasy. And, it has kind of an anime quality to it. Inagaki was working in this format well before cartoons were popular. He was doing these things in even as early as the 40s. But his cat designs, the popularity of his cat designs really, increased during the 50s. And they were all done in this way. They have kind of like an early Tom and Jerry quality to them, if you mix in a little bit of Picasso as an influence. But this was before. This was before those influences were even in Japan. And so it's interesting to note the art that was being produced post-war in Japan that may have given rise or influenced artists to produce anime and other art forms. And it's also something interesting to consider about the sort of the element of cuteness. You see that in Japan now. Kawaii is the word that people use to refer to this very Japanese quality of cuteness. And, the Japanese do revere that a sort of type of cuteness. And so Hello Kitty and all the other things in that arena should, come to mind. And this is before that. And yet there was this, I think Inagaki had his finger on the pulse of something that was sort of brewing within the culture. And he did create some very cute designs that you would look at now and see as quite contemporary. But they were produced in the 50s and 60s and so on. So I think that's a neat comparison between Inagaki's work and Yamaguchi's work, where Yamaguchi is certainly using the cat as the subject, or maybe as a part of the subject of this design. It's also this wonderful sense of light and pattern. But in this case here, it's completely different. Though Inagaki is as interested in light in his design as Yamaguchi, just in a different way. Light is part of the composition. There's this prism of light that filters through the design elements, where here it's different. But I think both of them are an interesting sort of comparison to show two artists working with a similar subject, but how different their work eventually what we see in their work. So I'm going to stop talking for a bit so you could actually look at the prints themselves. I'll just point out quickly that I love the way that Inagaki printed the cat's hair, his fur. I usually say hair, but I don't know what people say about cats. Is it fur or hair? But the surface here, you could see, it's almost tactile. You can almost feel it. It's very cool, and it's a huge difference when you compare it to this area of the shading that is simplified, almost to a point where it is almost suggested. So to have these two very striking different techniques to invoke different aspects of the cat are really pretty cool. then I'll come in here and show this print. And so this print was done in 1960, about 3 years after Inagaki did his. Now, I should also mention that Susumu Yamaguchi did not specialize in cat prints. This is one of only a few prints that he produced that don't show a landscape. He excelled in landscapes. He, in fact, focused primarily on mountains and mountain ranges. And so I think those are some of his most successful designs. However, in this design, this was a bit of a departure, but you could still see elements here in this design that echo his interest in mountains. Maybe I'm going out on a limb here, but the wood grain in the bottom part reminds me of either a flowing river, the streams of maybe a body of water or a field, and the wood grain in the background here with these peaks remind me of mountains. So it's interesting. Look how wonderful that wood grain effect is. It's very neat. I'm gonna back up a little bit so you could see both prints here. The Susumu Yamaguchi is about an Oban size print and a half. So just to give you a sense of the size, and the Inagaki's at least 2 Oban size prints, if not more. Actually, it's almost double the size of the Susumu Yamaguchi, so it should give you a sense of the size. Okay. Well, I want to thank you for joining me on another installment of Woodblock Wednesday. I thought today's sort of conversation is an interesting one where we can leave off on Inagaki. It gives you a sense of his entire body of work, being able to view the previous episode on Inagaki where there's some earlier florals, and in this case we get to see his work where he's focused on cats, and some of his most successful work is in the subject, so I thought it'd be fun to show a cat design to all of you. And this video was inspired by a few people messaging me asking me for a cat video, so there you have it. I'm always open to ideas and suggestions, so if you have some, feel free to send me a message and I'll be happy to accommodate all of you if I can. If I have something in inventory or in my private collection, I'm happy to share it. And so if you haven't had a chance, I invite you to go to my website. It's collectingjapaneseprints.com. And there's a lot of prints, there's a lot of information. I encourage you to click around. You'll learn quite a bit, hopefully, from the prints that I have, and maybe a few might be tempting. I do have quite a few still available, and we're also working very hard on our next exhibition, which will be dedicated to Western artists working in Japan. And that exhibition will go live at the end of this month in September. So there's something to look forward to if you're interested in Western artists that were in Japan and working in Japan, producing Japanese prints, in the sense that they were producing woodblock prints or etchings in the style of their contemporaries in Japan. Please follow us for that exhibition. Or if you're interested in reference books, we have a bookstore, an extensive bookstore. It's one of the largest bookstores online dedicated to Japanese prints It might be the largest. So I encourage you to visit us there, and you might find something you need or you may be interested in learning more about. So we can help you out with that as well. So feel free to also email me if you have any questions or any interests that you'd like to pursue. So again, thank you for joining me. I'm Elias Martin of CollectingJapanesePrints.com, and I will see you next week on the next installment of Woodblock Wednesday. Bye.